The man in the arena. It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again because there is no effort without error and shortcoming. But who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat. Theodore Roosevelt.
Hello, welcome to this episode of March the Truth podcast. Cops can't fight, or why cops can't fight. Before we get into that, which will be a little bit controversial, I'm sure I'm going to annoy a whole bunch of people, which probably mean it'll be a good podcast. Just want to thank everybody. We're past 17,500 subscribers. Channel continues to grow. We've all of a sudden picked up a lot of viewers from Japan, which is nice to see. So I appreciate it. Do have the seminar coming up in a couple of weeks in New York. Looks like we're going to have a pretty good crowd. We do know what I'm doing. So Thursday afternoon, I'll be doing some Chen-style Tai Chi Chuan practical method. Thursday night, self-defense, which I'm also going to do Friday night too. Going to cover mostly knife and gun stuff. Friday afternoon, going to do the Matayoshi Jo kata with some fighting applications. Saturday, Ishinru kata all day. We're going to pull moves and show fighting applications for them. And then Sunday will be Chen-style Tai Chi Chuan practical method, form, and partner work and fighting applications. All right, and that'll be basically what's going on. So we hope to have a good crowd. It looks like we are going to have a good crowd. I'm looking forward to seeing everybody. All right. Again, if you like the videos, click the like, share, subscribe button. Consider becoming a monthly member. There's a lot of videos on there that, again, all the videos for members are commercial free. So you're not watching any commercials. You get the podcast commercial free. You get the podcast a few days early. And then you get a lot of videos there that are only for members. Okay, so just keep that in mind. All right. So let's talk about why cops can't fight. Okay, so let me give you my law enforcement background, all right? I bring it up, I talk about it, but I never go into it in depth. So I became a New York City Transit police officer in 1988, all right? This was before the three departments merged. So back then you had Transit, the New York City Transit Police, the New York City Housing Police, and the NYPD, okay? So Transit Police, about 4,000 members, not a big department in the scale of things. I mean, bigger than a lot of other, but for New York, very different type of policing. You're working in a very hostile environment in the subway system. Just the environment's dangerous. Between stairs, tracks, power, it's just the trains themselves. Just a very, very dangerous environment. Most people did not want to be transit cops. I actually wanted to be a transit cop. So when I got the phone call telling me I was originally supposed to be in the NYPD, and then the night before I'm getting sworn in, I get a phone call, you're transit or you're nothing. And I was like, oh, great, I wanted to be transit. And the reason I wanted to be transit was they did solo patrol. They were the last pretty much law enforcement agency that still did solo patrol. So when I first became a police officer, I rode the trains in New York City from 8 at night to 4 o'clock in the morning. That's what I did for the first year, maybe a little more than a year. Okay. Very dangerous, very exciting. I loved it. But there were people that resigned within the first few weeks of getting out of the police academy. Okay. So they didn't like it. They didn't like the environment. They felt it was too dangerous for them. And I think those guys were smart. All right. Throughout my career in transit, I did everything. I was in transit. Eventually we merged and it all became the NYPD. But I stayed in the transit division for 17 years. Okay, I did everything there. Everything from driving sergeants, driving duty captains, working anti-crime, which I was dressed in street clothes. Did that a lot. School coordinator, where I covered a school station that had a lot of problems that they wanted me to straighten out. everything. Like I said, the TPF, 8 at night to 4 in the morning, riding the trains, everything I could possibly do in transit, I pretty much did. All right. Was cop of the month numerous times. All right. I'm a member of the NYPD Honor Legion, which is the oldest fraternal organization. You have to have one of the a certain level of medal, receive a certain level of medal to be inducted into that. Borough Commander's Award for an attempted murder arrest I made. So a lot. I made arrests for everything from guns, felony drugs, assault, rape, robbery, and a ton of fare evasion. People jumping the turnstiles, which they don't even arrest for anymore, which is a huge mistake and was causing such crime numbers to go up so much in the subway system. But I did everything. I'm also a graduate of the FBI Officer Survival School. I'm also a graduate and instructed the FBI Defensive Tactics Instructors School. I would actually, after I received my certification, one of my good friends in the FBI would ask me to come back. I would teach resisting handcuffing techniques. In other words, a criminal who's resisting, how to handcuff him. The FBI didn't have those techniques. So they said, hey, could you come in? And seeing as we were training mostly local law enforcement agencies, some of the stuff the FBI did, as a cop, I would just roll my eyes and be like, okay, yeah, that doesn't apply to what we do, right? The feds surround you with 10 guys with guns and you better give up, right? But cops, we don't have that luxury. A lot of times it's mano a mano. You got to get a guy in handcuffs, okay? A lot of law enforcement departments still to this day, single man in a car, they're not partnered up. So again, transit was different. You're on foot, all right? I worked at a time where the radios didn't always work. You're on a train. You're going from Brooklyn to Manhattan. You might be in the tunnel for 7 or 8 minutes. No one's coming to save you in those 7 to 8 minutes. So if you get involved in something that's, a fight or whatever, an arrest situation, you're on your own. Okay. Many transit cops often were dealing with more than one bad guy. So it was a very different type of policing. You could call into your radio for help and hear dead air. You didn't know if someone was coming to help you or not. You're on your own. All right. And again, if we had to call for help, a lot of times the NYPD was also contacted. So they would come and back us up. We would back up housing. We would back up NYPD. Many a time I helped the PD guys handcuff a guy they couldn't get handcuffed. So, it was a cooperative thing. We'd obviously give each other a hard time, each department. We're the best, you're the best, I'm the best. This is all within the camaraderie of being a police officer, all right? So I just wanted to give you my background. My last 5.5 years, I was in the intelligence division of the NYPD. I was in charge of Senator Chuck Schumer's security detail. So I was in charge of his security detail for 5.5 years. I retired a second grade detective. I've been retired 15 years, so I'm out quite a long time. I did develop a curriculum for handcuffing. So would teach that to my law enforcement students, would teach that if, let's say I would get a call from a supervisor in transit to say, hey, Mike, my anti-crime team, they've been having a little, getting roughed up a little bit. Could you come in and maybe do a few hour thing and tune them up? And, they'd come in, I'd show them the cuffing techniques for 4 hours, drill them on it. 2 weeks later, I'd always get a phone call from one of them saying, hey, that stuff you showed, it worked. It worked right away. Why in the academy doesn't the stuff work that they teach us? Let's talk about it. So let's talk about why I'm seeing more and more video where cops are having a very, very hard time defending themselves against criminals. And let me explain to you how this works. When you're a police officer, so I'm on a subway platform at 4 o'clock in the morning, and some criminal decides he's going to fight me. Now let's keep in mind, I'm carrying not one but 2 guns. Back then, it was 38s, revolvers. You carried a backup gun in case you needed more ammo or the guy was trying to take your other gun. You carried a nightstick. Now I actually brought with me, I still have it, the nightstick I carried on patrol, okay? Believe it or not, this was sold, it was called a Saleaton. I forget where I got it from, but I did get it from one of the martial arts supplies. And this is made out of a nice sturdy rattan. So this is a very light stick. This is not a hardwood. And what's great was it had a rubber handle, so the grip was phenomenal. Now, I'll be honest, 17 and a half years on patrol, because once I was in the intelligence division, I wasn't fighting crime anymore, okay? I was a security professional, making sure my protectees came to no harm. And I was the number one in the Senator Schumer security detail, but I also did other protective details. Prime Minister of Israel, Afghanistan, different ones, okay? Worked a lot of Israeli events with the Shin Bet, their secret service, all right? So I did a lot of that the last 5 years. So that wasn't fighting crime. That was preventing a possible assassination. That's what we were looking to do, okay? So with the nightstick, myself, I didn't use the nightstick a lot, okay? Again, I came on, I had 10 years of training under my belt in both Isshin-ryu Karate and Sosui Shitsuru Jiu-Jitsu. So, you know, as I became more proficient and got through my mistakes stage of handcuffing people and fighting criminals, it got easier. I used the nightstick on occasion. There were times when I had to use it where the situation warranted. But I got to be honest with you, if in 17 years I used the nightstick, I don't know, 10 times, that was probably a lot. We also carried mace. So 2 guns, nightstick, mace. All right. I also carried a knife. Again, didn't plan on stabbing any criminals. Liked the idea of having an extra weapon and also using it for different things. You might have to use it as a tool. So carried that also. When I initially got on, a lot of the senior guys were like, oh, you got to get yourself one of those big mag lights with heavy mag light. I literally carried that for 3 tours. I threw it in my locker. It was too heavy, and I knew I wasn't going to be hitting anybody with it. So I was like, yeah, I'm not carrying that. They also gave us this thing called a day billet, which was a short rubber truncheon about this big, totally useless. Threw it right up into my locker, never used it. So mace, pepper spray, whatever you want to call it, all right? I used that once in my career. And I maced a dog that was attacking another dog. And it did work. It was great. The dog stopped it and ran off. It was great. But I never used it on a criminal. I wasn't a fan. I had people mace guys that I was in the process of handcuffing and who also got maced. Me, okay? Was not thrilled, all right? So I wasn't a big fan. But I had law enforcement officers I worked with that used it very well. They liked it, okay? Good for them. Not something I was a huge fan of, all right? Again, you figure it out for yourself. So, training I received in the NYPD Police Academy, the physical training, fitness training was great. The fighting training, so-so. I wasn't overly impressed, okay? Then I went to the Transit Academy for 3 weeks. Now I'm already a police officer. I've already got my gun, my shield, what we call a shield, people call a badge, and I'm already a police officer. The training in the Transit Academy was a lot more serious, more intense. The techniques they taught were, I felt, better than what I was trained in the NYPD Academy. All right. The instructors at the time were Dennis Boodle, Al Gote. You know, so it was different. It was much better. So that was that. Then again, you know, I was invited to help teach FBI defensive tactics classes, and then they wanted me to actually take the class so I could get the certification. I did do that. So I taught a lot of that early in my career. Voluntary. Like, I didn't get paid. I did it because, again, I felt I was helping my fellow law enforcement officers. And I got good feedback. Guys would reach out and say, hey, that one technique you showed was great, worked really good, really appreciate it. And then I'd also get feedback from the local law enforcement guys who were teaching it through the bureau courses that, yeah, a lot of the stuff, the defensive tactics stuff, some of the stuff these guys are teaching doesn't really apply to us. Like, it's a very different style of policing from the FBI and boots on the ground law enforcement in the communities. Very different. Okay. So training wasn't great. So now I was training already. I already had a dojo, so I continued the training. I already had a bunch of law enforcement guys in my school. So for those of you guys, martial arts guys that are watching this, are wondering, well, why is Calandra talking about this? Well, because it also affects us in martial arts. So remember, when I interviewed Hunter Chip Armstrong, he said that there's three groups of people that are still creating fighting techniques. And those people are the military, the criminals, and law enforcement. That's it. Okay? Now, if you're a martial arts instructor, right, that has never handcuffed anybody, never had to try to handcuff anybody, and you tell me you're really good at handcuffing, I think that statement is one of the most ludicrous statements I'll ever hear. Okay. If you've never had to actually handcuff somebody who is resisting and doesn't want to be handcuffed, you'd be in for a big surprise. So that's why this is also going to apply to my martial arts friends. Within my dojo, I had active law enforcement officers. Those guys I trained different. So even the senior guys that weren't in law enforcement, when they were training with one of the cops, they were rough on them. We were rough on the cop students because we had to be, because they could walk out the door that night, and that night someone could try to kill them. So within my dojo for about 10 years, it was what I like to call a combat laboratory. So be finishing up my kids' class, one of the cops would walk in, hey, let me show you what happened last night. Guy came at me like this. This is what I did. I didn't feel it. I got away with it, and then what we do is, okay, that's what we're going over that night. And now we'd be pulling this apart and figuring out the optimum way to do it. As I've said in the past, some of the joint locks I tried initially didn't work. I knew it wasn't the techniques themselves, the way I was doing it. So I went back into the dojo, got students that were willing to fully resist, and that's how I figured it out. And then as I started doing it on criminals who always fully resisted, and I saw they were working, I knew I was on the right track. Okay? So actual fighting changed my martial arts. It improved my martial arts in a way that the dojo training cannot improve it. Cannot. And you can't do it for real in the dojo because someone's going to get hurt. Someone's going to get hurt. And again, a lot of people in the dojo, they have jobs. They can't afford to be hurt. But cops are different. You're going to engage in life and death struggles. All right? So the thing that separates a cop engaging in a life and death struggle and a civilian. The civilian gets into the fight. Maybe at a certain point, the guy doesn't want any more, so you're able to just walk away. The cop gets into the fight with the criminal who thinks he knows he's on parole or he's wanted for murder in another state. That criminal is fighting like you can't believe because he does not want to go back to jail. He knows he's going back. If he lets this cop get him in handcuffs, he's going back to jail for a long, long time. So now you're in the fight of your life. And you lose that fight, you have multiple weapons on you that criminal can take off you and kill you with. So that's the thing to keep in mind. You go down, there's a good chance he's going to kill you, if not seriously physically injure you. Like you're going to be really, really hurt. I've told the story in the past where the sergeant was driven into a girder, went down, split open from here to here, blood gushing on his back, overweight, dramatically out of shape. Small criminal takes his gun out of his holster, points it right at the sergeant's head. Sergeant begs for his life. For whatever reason, the criminal didn't kill him, but he went upstairs and fired rounds at the cops that were coming for backup. Sergeant literally dodged a bullet. So what my martial arts friends need to understand is law enforcement and you getting into a fight is very different. If the criminal's willing to fight you and you're armed with guns and a nightstick and mace and whatever, now cops carry tasers, okay? So very different. So you have to train the law enforcement guys different. There has to be some resistance. You have to train them where it's more rough and tumble. It's just the way it is, okay? many times, especially once we got a handle on crime in New York City, where crime dramatically dropped, you'd be a new police officer. You might go a year or two without having to put your hands on somebody. That's how much crime was gone in New York. It was crazy, right? Had one officer 2 years on, 3 years on. I walk in, there's guys waiting for me. They tell me, hey, a guy tried to throw so-and-so on the tracks last night. Okay? They said, you got to talk to him. So I go up to him, I said, what happened? He says, the guy picked me up in the air and tried to throw me on the tracks. I latched onto one of the subway girders and I held on for dear life. And I said, all right, you're all right? He goes, well, it shook me up. It's the first time I had someone try to literally kill me. I said, so let me explain something to you. You take your gun out and you shoot him. That's what you do. He's trying to kill you, okay? He's trying to kill you. You literally lucked out last night. You better get your head wrapped around it. So I realized early on in my career that most cops don't train. And the ones that do lift weights. So they're in the back, bench pressing. They're looking at themselves in the mirror. Man, look at my arms. And look, that will help you against a lot of criminals. You're physically strong. If you're fit, some cops are runners. That'll help your endurance okay. But, are they working on punching power? Are they working on how to defend against the punch when someone tries to literally take your head off for real? A lot of them weren't doing that. So a lot of the cops I worked with, they got hit. I didn't get hit, okay? So I don't ever remember getting punched in the face as a police officer. All right, simple as that. Maybe I did. Maybe it was a glancing blow, but I don't remember. And, I used to all the time say to cops, like, lifting heavy things up and putting them down is only going to take you so far when someone's trying to really kill you. And there were plenty of guys that were really big in my department and in my command that got their asses kicked. Okay, and some of them lucked out. Some of them were unconscious, and luckily the criminal ran away and didn't decide to end their lives. All right. I recently saw a video here in Phoenix where the the female officer punched in the face, knocked unconscious. As she goes down to the floor, she rolls and breaks her ankle. Luckily, the criminal just ran off. But if she's unconscious on the floor. Okay. So, there's a lot of fat cops. I see them, you see them, it's just the way it was. All right? There's a lot of cops in very good shape. There's a lot of fat cops. If you're in law enforcement and you're morbidly obese or you're very overweight, you're in the wrong profession. Now, if you're a do-nothing cop, which believe me, there's plenty of them, okay? Every profession has its losers. We have bad doctors, bad teachers, we have bad cops, bad everything, okay? Bad in all professions. That's just the way it is, all right? If you're very overweight, you're a do-nothing cop, okay. But you're still going to run into trouble at some point, and you could be in big trouble, all right? You're going to run out of gas really quick. In an actual combat situation, you're huffing and puffing in seconds. I don't care how good a shape you're in, okay? There's a lot of stuff going on with the body, all right? So it's important that you get your act together. So for the cops out there that are watching this, for the martial arts instructors that are out there watching this, okay, you got to set the example. You have law enforcement people in your dojo and you're morbidly obese. Okay, get your act together. Set an example. If you're a law enforcement officer and you're morbidly obese, get it together, okay? First, if you don't look professional, all right? You want to look professional. How you carry yourself, how you look goes a long way to whether or not the criminal decides he's going to try you, okay? He looks at you and goes, look at this big fat guy. I'm going to handle him easy. Okay, problem number one for you, all right? So it's important to take care of yourself. If you're a law enforcement officer, you should be doing some type of fight training. And anything is better than nothing. However, I'm not a big fan of the rolling around on the floor fight training. If you're rolling around on the floor working grappling and putting people in leg locks and joint locks on the floor, no, that's not ideal for law enforcement. You want to be up, you want to put the bad guy on the floor, okay? You need to be proficient in strikes. You want to be proficient in certain joint locks, okay? sweeps, taking the guy to the ground, okay? You don't have to be proficient in a million things, but you want to have a group of techniques that you can take out of your toolbox and use against the criminal that you know work for you. So I teach a lot of techniques in the dojo. Why? I have my techniques that I know work for me, but I'm not sure what techniques are going to work for you. You have to figure that out. Your body's different from mine, okay? So these are all important things. So why can't modern cops, why do they seem to have such a hard time dealing with someone trying to kick their ass? So, one, let's talk some politics. So, if you live in a blue state, they're anti-law enforcement. New York, anti-law enforcement. Simple as that, okay? Not everybody, but a lot of people are. Okay, so the community's not behind you. That's a huge problem. So now you go hands-on with someone and you're videotape punching him in the face 3 times. Well, why'd you have to punch him more than once? Okay, now you're on the floor with the guy and now you're really laying into him because you're in the fight of your life. Now you take out your telescopic baton. Total waste as a weapon. And now you hit him with the Why'd you have to hit him with the baton? Why couldn't you just get him in handcuffs? Why'd you have to shoot him in the chest? Why couldn't shoot the gun out of his hand? Like it's some kind of movie, okay? Wake up, people. You're living in fantasy land, okay? Most of you have never had a bullet fired in your direction. It's not a pleasant experience, okay? I happened to walk out of a bodega when a drive-by one time. I was with another cop. Luckily, the bullets didn't come anywhere near me. But that idea of lead coming in your direction, I can tell you now, it's not an enjoyable experience. And cops I worked with that were in shootings, they'll tell you the same thing, all right? They'll tell you the same thing. Shoot the gun out of his hand. It's movie bullshit, okay? So, even in a lot of red states, okay, the police are not backed up. Phoenix, big city here, they don't back up their officers, okay? They just changed their use of force policy. It's a joke, okay? How about your leadership of a police department? You come out and make a public announcement, okay? You fight one of our criminals, you fight one of our cops, you're going to the hospital. You take a shot at one of our cops, you're probably going to the morgue. That makes the criminal think, man, maybe I don't want to pick my hands up. No, we're okay, you're okay. We're going to treat the criminals with respect. In New York, the ADA, as soon as they're arrested, they let them out. They don't even charge resisting arrest anymore. So now you're allowed to resist arrest. Okay, so that's a huge problem. Going to cause more criminals to arrest. Assaults on NYPD officers, way up. Assaults on transit cops in New York, through the roof. Okay, it's a huge problem. Thanks to certain political leaders. You don't agree with me? I don't give a shit because this is the reality. Look at the crime stats in Chicago, in California, in New York City, okay? All the big blue. Seattle, Oregon, crime is through the roof in all these states. Who are the leaders? Look at them. End of discussion, okay? Why else can't cops fight? They don't train. They're lazy, okay? We're in the cell phone generation. The younger cops coming on now, they weren't rough and tumble. They're playing video games, okay? They're texting each other. They're not going out playing sports, a lot of them, right? They're not going out getting to fisticuffs with their friends and 2 minutes later you're friends again. No, they have play dates. Oh, let's set up a play date, okay? These are the modern guys that are coming on the job. All right. Female officers. All right. Let's talk reality. Any woman that's watching this or any woman that's a police officer that thinks they're the physical match for a male, you're living in fantasy land. Fantasy land. You're not as physically strong as a man. If you're not training to be able to fight, you got a huge problem. A huge problem. Okay? So, again, Phoenix, their goal is 30% of the department, female officers. Okay, how about the goal being the best of the best? The best of the best. Regardless of your race, your color, your sex, the best of the best. You're a female officer and you can complete the requirements that the males have to required to do. I want you. You're in. Believe me, I worked with a couple of females. I worked with one female in particular, Henrietta Reeves. Okay. I take her over some of the guys I worked with. She's willing to fight, kept herself in good shape. She knew what she was doing. Would work with her every day. Never mind working with her. There were guys I worked with. When I saw I had to work with him, I was like, oh boy, I'm on my own. So this is not unique. But ladies, realize you're not as physically strong as a man. Okay? You better figure it out. Learn how to fight. Learn how to deal with it. Okay? Because if not, you're going to be in trouble. Okay? But that applies to the guys. Most of you modern guys coming on, you're not rough and tumble. And now we're not getting military guys. Why aren't a lot of military guys joining the police department? Because they see cops are being treated like shit all over the country. So why would they join? They're like, no, I'll pass. I'll take another job. So a lot of the candidates you're getting, they're lowering requirements everywhere. So are you getting the best of the best? No, you're not. And those are the people out there protecting you, general public. Okay. So that's one reason a lot of them can't fight. They're good texters. All right? They don't know how to use this also. It's a huge problem. This is your number one. This is your number one. This and this, number 1 and 2 to be a good cop. You use this well, you know how to use this, you can avoid a lot of problems. Okay? But at some point it's going to get physical and it's going to get nasty and it's going to be violence on a level you never in your life thought you were going to experience. Okay? As I've said in previous podcasts, I've broken people's arms. They kept fighting. UFC, guy gets put in an arm bar, right? Okay, why? Well, because he doesn't want his arm broke. The criminal who knows if I get him in handcuffs is going back to jail for 25 years because he's wanted for murder in another state, he'll take that broken arm and he will keep fighting. Okay, folks, it's a whole different level of violence. Okay, so let's talk about some other things. Technology. The over-reliance on technology. Okay, I carried the straight stick. All right. Now, near the end, they gave us these ridiculous telescopic batons that you snap out. It makes a really cool noise that's very intimidating. But then you hit somebody with it and they stand there and look at you. Pull up the videos. They're all over the place. I see cops in Great Britain hitting people in the legs with these things. I watched 3 cops hitting one guy with these telescopic batons in a video a couple of weeks ago. The guy kept fighting. No effect. Useless. Go back to the straight stick. Either a good quality rattan or a wood. Every department should do that. These telescopic batons, useless. Not better for you. Useless. They're terrible. Okay, next. Chemical spray. Works sometimes, not all the time. I've seen people getting blasted in the face with mace, chemical spray, pepper spray, no effect. Kept fighting. I've seen other people get hit, they go down. They give up right away. But again, the over-reliance on it. So bad technology with the expanding baton, useless as a weapon, okay? Over-reliance on mace. Now here's the big one. The taser. Okay, the taser. My son had a guy coming at him with a knife. He hit the guy with the taser. They trained them in prison to hit the ground and roll to break the wires. Now there's no juice going into the darts that are stuck in the guy. The guy bounced right back up. Yeah, luckily he dropped the knife because the jolt hit him, so it worked in that regards great. But the guy jumped right back up and squared off, and my son had to go hands-on with him. Luckily, my son was trained for a long, long time, hit him with one punch, put him to sleep. Handcuffs. That guy had only gotten out of prison for a long stint 1 week before that incident. Okay. So tasers don't always work. Don't believe the bullshit that the taser companies are trying to sell you. Oh yeah, the taser will always incapacitate. Now, I got to tell you, some of my favorite videos are watching people get tasered. Stiffen up, fall, hit the ground. Okay, but there's a lot of ones we don't see where the taser doesn't work. Why doesn't it work? The guy's wearing a heavy coat. The darts don't get through the skin. The taser doesn't go in deep enough, doesn't work. The guy breaks the wires, okay? The guy's so batshit crazy, so high on meth or any other drugs that he doesn't care. He takes it, okay? So, all the reliance on these so-called superior technologies for law enforcement have reduced guys' ability to go hands-on and physically control someone and get them in handcuffs. So these are huge problems, all right? I have a handcuffing curriculum. I'm actually going to film it when I go back to New York in a couple of weeks. How did I develop the handcuffing curriculum? So my first instructor created a bunch of handcuffing techniques in the dojo. At that point, he'd never ever handcuffed somebody. And he was a fire marshal. So very rarely did he deal with a resisting person, okay? What I did was I was handcuffing people. So I'd go to grab the guy, he'd resist, he'd pull a certain way, he'd move his arm a certain way, and I had to figure out how to follow up on that to counter it and eventually get him in handcuffs. When I became proficient at several different types of resisting that I saw the human body did consistently. The guy's going to pull this way, he's going to pull across, he pulls his arm straight, he goes like this, all these different things. And I figured out how to move in, counter that, get the guy down, put him in handcuffs. So I didn't go in the dojo and take one of my students and say, hey, we're going to create a handcuffing curriculum. No. I did the techniques for real on resisting criminals. And then what I did was I said, okay, I have the techniques now. Now I'm going to create a set of two-man kata. And in the two-man kata, the guy who is the criminal, he's resisting. He resists, okay? And you learn how to deal with that resistance. So I didn't create a bunch of fantasy techniques in the dojo that I think will work. So my martial arts friends, unless you've handcuffed people and actually had to put them in handcuffs, okay, stop kidding yourself, all right? You got to go to someone that knows, that's done that and learn techniques from that someone. And I'm not saying my techniques are the only one that works. There's other guys that I'm sure have great handcuffing techniques. Why? Because like me, they've probably handcuffed 1,000 people, okay? Think about that. I've probably put 1,000 people in handcuffs. Okay, so, right. Some didn't resist. That was a good day. A lot of them did. And I had to forcibly get them in handcuffs, okay? So, over-reliance technology is a problem. Not supporting law enforcement is a problem. Now the cops are hesitant. They're afraid. If I do this, am I going to get in trouble? Am I going to go to jail? Am I going to get indicted? So we're putting restrictions on our law enforcement personnel that are getting them hurt and killed. You can thank your politicians for that. It's as simple as that. And if you're a member of the general public and you're anti-law enforcement, okay, don't call them when you need help. Don't call them. When the guy's kicking your door in the middle of the night, don't dial 911. Anyway, they're not going to get there in time. And you're so anti-cop, well, why should they help you then? Don't call them. I find it funny. They're always anti-law enforcement until something happens to them. And then all of a sudden they want, well, why weren't the police there? Well, I called the police. It took them 10 minutes to get there. Okay, right. But you're the one that hates the cops. You're not giving them any funding. You want to defund them. You're always on TV saying how they suck. They're animals. They're racist. They're this. Okay. So, like me right now, my son's in law enforcement, but I don't recommend that people go into the law enforcement profession because of the way they're treating them. All right. And look, in my career, it went up and down. Was good, was bad, was good, was, and again, a lot of it had to do with political leadership. Politicians supported the police officers, it was better. All right. They're called the thin blue line for a reason. They're what separates you from anarchy. So please think about this. If you're teaching law enforcement guys in your martial arts school, find out how to properly handcuff people, techniques that actually work. You have to show them stuff that they can use. It's very important. It could cost them their life. All right. If you're in law enforcement and you decide to do the job, I suggest you do some training. Again, my rule was I go out that door on patrol, I plan on coming back. I'm coming back to my family. It's as simple as that. That was my mindset. Okay. And I did. I was involved in a lot of stuff, a lot. Okay. A lot. Hundreds of life and death encounters. Okay. Some could have easily gone the wrong way and I didn't make it. Okay. But luckily I prevailed and came out on top. So you should train. Very important if you're in law enforcement. If you're not, well, whatever. And if you're only lifting things up and putting them down, okay, good luck. Eventually your strength's going to fade. You're going to come across someone who's stronger and you're not going to be able to handle them. If you have ability, if you have skill overcomes strength. But you have to have real skill, not fake skill. All right? So please think long and hard on this. I wanted to talk about this. I want police officers to learn to protect themselves. I want my martial arts friends to figure out how to properly train law enforcement people that are training in their martial arts schools. Not fake make-believe. If you don't know how to handcuff somebody, go to someone who does. And that's got to be someone who's actually handcuffed people. And is hopefully a martial artist, was in law enforcement. Oh yeah, I handcuffed 500 people. This is how I felt they resisted. This is how I counted it. Okay, good. I'll leave you with a couple of things. The NYPD went to a baton called the PR-24, which looked like an Okinawan Twifa, Tonfa. Okay. When I went for the instruction, I literally took the instructors on the side. By that time, I had about 12 years on the job. A lot of people knew who I was. I went to them, I said, you guys realize this is total bullshit, right? Like, this weapon is useless. You're trying to turn a striking weapon into a weapon that's a grappling weapon. They're showing me joint locks with this tonfa. And I'm like, this is never going to work, ever. And very quickly, that disappeared because it was useless. So again, you're trying to make something a use for something it was never intended to be used for. All right. At some point, these are going to have to touch the guy. You're going to have to put him in handcuffs. So these are what the weapons you need to become proficient with. Okay? These things called your hands. You have to physically go in there and put the handcuffs on them. So learn, train, okay? It's incredibly important. All right? Again, my martial arts friends, if you feel this topic is not something, I don't care. Hopefully there's some law enforcement guys watching this. Again, I can show you the techniques via Zoom. If you're in law enforcement, you get a couple of guys together, I can show you the techniques via Zoom. No problem, okay? So law enforcement guys out there, you want to learn the techniques, reach out. Be happy to schedule something, okay? Believe me, it won't be expensive for you, right? It'll be well worth it, okay? And you'll see the techniques work. Okay, and you're pretty much able to do them right away. All right, that's the thing that's kind of unique. So, probably pissed off a whole bunch of people on this one. It's okay, don't care. All right, some things had to be said. Very important. If you liked it, I'm glad you liked it. If you liked it, share it. Click the subscribe button. Click the like button. Consider becoming a member. All right. Hopefully have an interview next week. Hoping trying to line something up, all right? And again, hope to see a bunch of you at the seminars in a couple of weeks. And don't forget that Walt Young seminar. That seminar is coming up, all right, in October. Pretty sure it's going to happen. So reach out to Walt about further details. We've had a few more people reach out. We want to get more, all right? As always, I appreciate you all, and I'll see you in the next podcast. Take care.
There is no hunting like the hunting of man, and those who have hunted armed men long enough and liked it never care for anything else thereafter. Ernest Hemingway.